So, Mike, there's some things you disagree with on whether the Isle of Man can power itself with renewable energy. What were the problems you saw?
I think the main problem is that although we want to be energy independent, and this was something that was discussed at the Citizens Forum, that every single person, I think but me, wanted us to be 100% self-powered. My view is that, following on from the reports and the presentations that we've received, that having perhaps like the interconnector strategy, for want of a better word, and importing our energy from a larger neighbour might be the way to go. They have the economy of scale, they have the base load. That might be easier for us than looking at our own capital projects.
Yeah, well, so it'd be import rather than export, because what we're proposing is that you would export to Ireland and the UK. The main issues with buying electricity, one is the price, and it'll be volatile in the future, so it's hard to predict. You're then also dependent on if it's from the UK, you're dependent on their carbon emissions. You're assuming that they're going to reach their net zero commitments, which is fairly difficult for a country the size of the UK. They have a policy where they're going to be using nuclear power for base load, and they've got intermittent, an ambitious program for wind energy, which really is fairly unrealistic in two respects. One, that slab of nuclear power is not flexible, and then there's the intermittency of the wind. And to be honest, I think many energy experts are thinking there's a good chance they're going to have problems in the future, and I think the UK are aware of that as well. So they're building an interconnector to Norway.
They are using Norway as a battery.
Essentially that's what they're doing. But of course, they're still, on a daily basis, they're trying to match supply to demand. And if they get a problem and the Isle of Man is connected into that, they start turning things off to avoid blackouts. And the first, I would have said one of the first connections they'll turn off will be the Isle of Man.
I wonder if they will. In some respects, we're a crown dependency. So by definition, we're a dependent, and we're a dependent on a number of fronts. Our foreign policy, we pay a little stipend to the UK, and they manage that for us. Could we also not have something similar for our energy? In some respects, we could be dependent on them.
You mean pay for a guarantee?
If you will,
yeah. Well, then they would need some other facility to turn off, so somebody else will lose out. I mean, yes, obviously you can pay for anything. It won't be cheap.
Okay. So is it, what you're saying is, correct me if I'm wrong, that it would be cheaper to be earlier on in, so if we produce our own energy, it'll be better for us than having someone else produce it, and then we have to then pay their profit margins and their operational costs?
Well, I mean, it's like, we import fuel, you pay for the fuel. If you're importing electricity, it's exactly the same. So somebody else is making profit on that. Whereas if you have the sort of resource we have in the Isle of Man, and phenomenal wind, but in addition, shallow sea and mountains and water, why would you not use that? If the Isle of Man cannot power itself with renewable energy, nowhere can.
Right, so there are other islands around that are indeed doing exactly as you say. If we look to our northern neighbours, the Orkney Islands are producing tremendous amounts of wind renewable resource, but then only when the wind is blowing. There are times when the wind isn't blowing. How would you propose managing that? So
the key thing is having storage, obviously. And again, the Isle of Man has certain assets, and that's uplands that rise straight from the sea, and a large amount of water, whether that's in the form of rain or whether it's the sea itself. Hydro storage is a well-developed technology. We have some ideas in ways that it could work even better in the Isle of Man, but that's essentially, that would be the battery, and it's a very efficient system, hydro storage.
Hydro is, and it's in use elsewhere.
Yeah.
how would such a project work on the Isle of Man? Where would we do this? Just to give you just a bit of context, the Sulby Reservoir is in some respects our pump storage. We can get 1 megawatt of electricity from it, but only if we drain our drinking water through it. So how would you see?
So the main elements, what makes hydro storage work is either a large volume of water and or significant elevation. It's potential energy essentially. So I say that the mountains rise quickly. So you know there's a couple of sites we've been looking at where you can get from sea level to 400 meters in a very, very short distance. It's so unusual that rise from the sea. And you know a good analogy is Turlough Hill in Ireland. This is near Dublin in the Wicklow Mountains. Same sort of mountains as we have here, rounded top. And they what they did there 40 years ago, in fact, they excavated from the top down and produced essentially a cylindrical reservoir. Material that came out of that was made to raise the sides as well. You can, in fact, I don't think you can see it from the ground. You know, you've got tens of meters of water there, and an elevation which is less than what we're looking about here in the Isle of Man, 280 meters, 285 meters. And that provides nearly all the storage for Ireland.
What sort of capacity is that, do you know?
Yeah, I think it's 2.5 million cubic meters of water, and we're sort of thinking about 4 to 5 million cubic meters. This would allow us to export power as well, and you know so we're perhaps close to doubling the volume of the reservoir, and also it's higher elevation, so it does provide significant storage. And
do you know what sort of size that is in terms of megawatts?
The numbers we're talking about at the moment would be about 280 megawatts for 24 hours.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, so that would be 2 projects. That's what we're looking to. There's various options. We've even got one that's offshore. It's in a lagoon which in that situation you would need bigger volumes of water, of course. So it's essentially an enhanced tidal lagoon.
Right. Okay, but because it's so much lower, the potential
you don't have that height. Yeah, so you need a lot of tidal turbines essentially. Yeah.
Okay, that's fascinating. Why do you think the Isle of Man isn't looking at these kind of options? So just again, another bit of context. So we are looking at community renewable. And what that broadly means is small scale renewable, which feeds into the grid at various places around the island. It's more or less a nod to renewables rather than actually using them for any meaningful amount of generation.
I think it's all new, of course, the energy transition, and there is this fear about the upfront cost. But the way to look at it is this is obviously an investment for the future, but you'd use private enterprise to fund. So they would see, energy companies normally fund projects, and it's getting it to a scale where a large energy company would be interested in a project in the Isle of Man. So that's again the advantage of exporting. It provides scale and will interest, I think, most energy companies in Europe, if you can do it at the right scale. Otherwise, it is, you could think of the Isle of Man as a community, and so just for the Isle of Man is a community project, whether you're talking about 10,000 or the full population of 85,000, it's still going to be a community project. But if you can open it up and you can connect the Isle of Man to Ireland and the UK, then essentially you're part of the whole European system, in fact.
Yeah, that would be incredible, actually, for this aspect of being self-contained, but then not cut off from our neighbours, to be able to import energy when we need it and export it.
And also, if you've got 2 markets, Ireland and the UK, it means that they're in competition with one another. I think that's the advantage as well. And in fact, then you're in competition with the rest of Europe as well. So you're not, if you're beholden to one country, then there's obviously a risk there that one, it's the security, but also that you're not in a strong negotiating position. You could also, of course, if you've got good storage here, you can provide a storage facility for Ireland and the UK itself. Obviously not enough for the entire country, but that they're slotting in different facilities as they go to try and deal with the drive to net zero emissions.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose probably the biggest issue with the import, as you say, is the additional variable cost that we're going to be, if you will, burdened with or have to pay. If we're importing energy from the UK, then we'll be paying the more or less UK rates.
Yeah.
This has been said to be about 17% more expensive, on a unit basis. Right. How would you see the generation of renewables on the island and having the island as a net exporter of energy? It is currently an exporter of energy, but only from fossil fuels. But having the Isle of Man as a net exporter of renewable energy, would that not have a cost margin, about the same? Or
well, the key thing is, the first thing is to avoid the price volatility. So and what you would try and do if you can scale it, to 5 or 6 times the Isle of Man's needs, then essentially what you would be negotiating with industry, the deal you'd be doing in the public-private partnership is that the Isle of Man would be guaranteed a low price for their electricity, and it'd be a single price, it wouldn't be variable. And where the company, so that what you're offering is the use of the free resource, which is the wind and the sun, and you're also providing connection to the UK and Ireland. And the value then for the company is if you can say, well, also you can market it when prices are high, when the demand is high in the UK and Ireland. And that, again, is the storage part of it. That's the key element that suddenly you see, okay, now we can start to make revenue, really significant revenue. And if you're wanting the cost paid up front, which is the sensible thing because it takes the financial risk away, it also means somebody else does the project management, then you have to offer, companies will expect to see a way to profit from that in the future. So again, that's the partnership. You just need to make sure that the government has negotiated the most benefit for the Isle of Man.
What you're saying sounds really, really exciting, actually, but it almost sounds like a message that's potentially too late. Now, the Isle of Man's expert energy contractors have looked at a variety of options, but they didn't particularly look in this direction. Why do you think that is?
Well, there was 2 reasons, I think. One is they were constrained. They were told basically what to model, and that, that's understandable. You need to give people a frame of reference. The other part was that wasn't included was the revenue part. What is it worth now to an energy company to build a wind farm? And as you know, BP and BEW have leased acreage just offshore from beyond Isle of Man territorial sea. 800 square kilometres, that's 20% of Manx territorial sea, and they're paying over £200 million a year just to lease the seabed. That's without a contract. So you can really see the value there. That's a significant. So if we said 10% of Manx territorial sea around the margins where it's most windy, you're talking really an annual license fee in the order of £100 million a year.
There's certainly value there. I suppose the actual value can be debated, but natural resources don't follow our boundaries, particularly our political boundaries. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of investment in offshore wind, offshore from the Isle of Man, but not on Isle of Man territorial seas.
The island isn't benefiting from that. Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of sad, and it's something that needs to be looked into. A lot of people on the Isle of Man can see the wind turbines. On a nice clear day, you can actually see that particular wind farm from the Isle of Man. But we don't benefit from an ounce of its energy. No. Is that something that you think a deal could be done in the future, where we can access some of that energy potentially through an interconnector?
I think you would have to. No, I think, well, obviously, if you're buying electricity from the UK,
you're going to get a mix
and you can also buy it specifically from green sources. But again, you're going to be paying a premium for that. I think the way is you reverse it and you say, well, you could bring energy from Manx territorial sea to the Isle of Man, there's an investment required to strengthen the grid, the transmission. You need to invest in interconnectors, but relatively the cost of those are small compared to the investment in a wind farm. That's what industry would pay for. And again, if you say here's a route to market, here is a way of marketing when the prices are high, because we're giving you a facility here to store as well. That's, to be honest, everyone wins on that one.
Yeah, indeed. It definitely seems to me that there should be some element of what you've said, if not all, some part of it, which certainly hasn't been explored to my knowledge. Certainly hasn't been explored on the Citizens Forum, which I'm the small business stakeholder of. A lot of people ask me questions. They see the wind farm basically and go, could we not have a little bit of? Can we not build nearby? On our side of the water, on our side of the fence, can we not have something similar because the resource is there?
Well, as a businessman, what we'd also say is, in the future, you're going to have a source of green power. Otherwise you'll be charged for that. The emissions associated with the power, the Scope 2 emissions. So that's important for businesses already here. That one, the emissions are lower on the power you buy, but of course also that you get a stable price and it's relatively low cost. But in addition, that will, if it's done, before it's too late, then you will also attract other industries, particularly the ones that are power intensive, to the island as well, because every company is in the same position.
Yes, the cost per kilowatt hour here is a definite disincentive to certain industries.
And so if you can get the cost down, but also you can say it's also...
But we're looking at putting the cost up. I mean, the scenarios from my conversations with the Citizens Forum, and if those people are listening to this, they'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. The costs are an increase.
Yeah, they're actually not. The scenario 4, for instance, is the one with a considerable, and that wasn't there originally. I think there was push to go for rather than just buying UK electricity. One was a model of generating significant renewable power here. That's scenario 4. The wholesale price is actually lower. It's the lowest of all the scenarios. So it's just a question of how do you invest in to get the production for the generation of the renewable power in the first place, and that's where you work out how the economics work best for the Isle of Man. But you can, it's not a difficult equation to see if the fuel is free, which is wind, or it could be solar as well. If the fuel is free, that in one way or other nowadays with technology advanced so far with wind and solar, it's going to be better that than buying it from somebody else.
Yeah, for sure. But the question is how, and we also haven't explored this. It's not particularly a direction that the Isle of Man, it's fair to say, government doesn't wish to go in. Now, we have on the Isle of Man a very interesting history with capital projects. We are not particularly successful in building large-scale infrastructure. So any of the infrastructure that you're proposing would have to be dealt with privately. They'd have to be dealt with in another way, rather than just sort of leasing an area of land. With the Isle of Man government, would have to have some sort of involvement in it. Now, it's quite possible that, speculating, that Isle of Man government may wish to simplify things and pick the simpler option rather than potentially risk an unsuccessful project.
I think it's a simpler option actually if you let industry, private sector do it, because they have a very strong motive. Obviously, they want to get projects done on time, within budget, and they also have the levers to make sure that happens. They're used to doing these sort of projects. It's not rocket science to them. So I think you just make sure that the government is in control, and the control they have are the cards. You have the assets. The assets are the wind, the mountains, the water, and probably also you're saying the facility to export, which would be the interconnectors. But the actual funding, and so the financial risk and the project management, so the technical risk, would be taken on by industry, and they make sure these things happen. I mean, if you saw the projects that are going on around Europe, they are incredible projects, but they're all
huge scale.
Huge scale.
You can look at them all through YouTube if you can't travel.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And they're nearly all on time and within budget, because actually costs are falling with renewables all the time. So, you know, it's very much in their interest to make these successful. And they demonstrate it to shareholders as well, and many companies, even the oil and gas companies, are having to turn away now from oil and gas. So they're looking for these sort of, you know, green power, clean electricity type projects.
Sure. But of course, the advantage there to capitalising on your own assets does reduce costs, but it does also increase risk. There is definitely a margin there for profit, but there's also a much higher risk. I think potentially it's Isle of Man governments, I'm speculating, lack of appetite for risk that might be driving them towards a perhaps artificially limited.
Yeah, I think the risks are higher, you see, if you're depending on the UK. As I said, we've said there's a financial risk, there's obviously the security risk. But again, if in the old days when you had oil and gas resources, Abu Dhabi doesn't do any of the development of those oil resources. Bahrain doesn't do any of that development. They just take the money.
Yeah.
It's all done by companies, and although we wouldn't do it nowadays because of the emissions implications, it's the same thing. You've got a resource here, which is wind and the mountains and the sea, and that's where offers benefit to the Isle of Man. But exactly like you say, you don't want the government taking on that risk. In fact, it is rocket science if you do it, if you've never done it before. This is where you just need to say, well, our bargaining chips are the following. We have what the industry is desperate to have.
Yeah.